Before his wedding to the woman he believed was his soulmate, Vincent Moretti, the most feared mafia boss in New York, decided to test his fiancée in the most unexpected way. He pretended to fly to Chicago for urgent business, but instead concealed himself in a secret surveillance room hidden deep within his mansion. His dying mother, Isabella, had whispered with her last strength, "Watch how she treats me when you're gone. That's when you'll see her true heart." What Vincent discovered through those cameras would shatter everything he thought he knew. But it wasn't his fiancée's cruelty that shocked him. It was what the family doctor revealed during an emergency visit that would change 3 lives forever. The secret room was cold and dark, and illuminated only by the pale glow of 8 security monitors casting blue light across Vincent Moretti's face. He sat motionless in the leather chair, his sharp eyes fixed on the screen showing his mother's bedroom. Isabella lay in her bed, her once vibrant body now ravaged by stage 4 cancer, her breathing shallow and labored. The doctors had given her 3 months, maybe less. Each breath she took was borrowed time. His fiancée, Dr. Sarah Chen, had moved into the mansion 6 months ago. She was a renowned oncologist who'd treated his mother at Memorial Hospital, and somewhere between late-night vigils beside Isabella's bed and shared moments of grief, Vincent had fallen in love. When he'd proposed, Sarah had said yes through tears, promising to care for his mother until the very end. Her devotion had seemed absolute, perfect even. But doubt had crept into Vincent's mind like poison, seeping through cracks in armor. His consigliere Marcus had planted the seed 2 weeks ago over whiskey in Vincent's office. "Boss, people change when they think no one's watching," Marcus had said, his weathered face serious. "The woman who smiles at you might show a different face when you're not there, especially when there's money involved. Your money." Vincent had wanted to dismiss it, had tried to brush aside the suspicion. But Marcus had been with him for 20 years, had saved his life more than once, and had never steered him wrong. The words had burrowed deep, festering in the darkness of sleepless nights. So Vincent had staged this elaborate test. He'd told Sarah he needed to handle an urgent crisis in Chicago, a territory dispute that required his personal attention. When he'd packed bags, accepted her tearful goodbye kiss, and driven away in his black Rolls-Royce while she waved from the mansion steps. But he hadn't gone to Chicago. Instead, he'd circled back through the service entrance, descended into the basement, and sealed himself inside this secret room, a surveillance chamber that had been built into the mansion's foundation decades ago. This was where his father had once monitored threats to the Moretti family, where Vincent himself had spent countless hours tracking enemies, planning operations, watching for betrayal from the outside world. He'd never imagined he'd use it to watch the woman he planned to marry. The first day had been almost painful to observe. Sarah moved through her duties with mechanical precision, administering medications on schedule, checking vital signs, and adjusting Isabella's pillows. She was professional, clinical, competent. But something was missing. The warmth Vincent had fallen in love with seemed dimmed, replaced by a strange tension he couldn't name. She seemed distracted, distant, as if her mind were somewhere else entirely. Was this who she really was? Had the tender, caring woman he'd proposed to been nothing but performance? On the second day, Vincent's suspicions deepened. Sarah made numerous phone calls, always stepping out of Isabella's room, always glancing over her shoulder before she spoke. He'd adjusted the audio feeds, straining to hear, but caught only fragments, coded language that made his instincts flare with alarm. The shipment, the protocol, the timeline. She was coordinating something, but what? And then he'd watched her receive mysterious deliveries, medical supplies she signed for personally and immediately hid away in her private quarters. He'd seen her on her laptop late at night, transferring large sums of money between accounts. His money? Was she stealing from him? Planning to disappear? Vincent's jaw clenched as he stared at the monitors now on what he'd decided would be the final day of his surveillance. His hand rested near his phone, ready to call Marcus, ready to end this charade and confront her. But then everything changed. Through the monitor, he watched Isabella's breathing suddenly become labored, her face contorted in pain. The medical monitors in her room began beeping urgently. Vital signs dropping, oxygen levels plummeting. Vincent's heart seized. His mother was crashing. Sarah's response was immediate. She dropped everything and rushed to Isabella's bedside. But instead of calling 911, instead of activating the emergency medical team Vincent had on retainer, she made a single phone call. "Dr. Morrison, I need you here now. I don't care about the storm. Isabella's crashing and I can't—" Her voice broke. "Please, just get here." Vincent's hand moved toward his gun. Why wasn't she calling an ambulance? Was she letting his mother die? Every muscle in his body coiled, ready to burst from this room and— But then he watched her work. Watched her perform manual respirations with fierce precision. Watched her check airways, adjust oxygen levels, monitor heart rhythms. Every movement showed desperate determination. This wasn't someone who wanted Isabella to die. This was someone fighting death itself with everything she had. Within the hour, Doctor, Morrison arrived, the gray-haired family physician who'd treated Isabella for 2 decades. Vincent tracked him through multiple cameras as he rushed through the rain-soaked night into the mansion. The 2 doctors huddled over Isabella's frail form, working in perfect synchronization, battling to pull her back from the edge. After 45 agonizing minutes, Isabella stabilized. Sarah collapsed against the wall, her professional composure finally shattering. Her whole body shook with exhaustion and released tension. Dr. Morrison checked the final readings, then placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. And that's when Vincent heard it. Through the audio feed, words that made his blood run cold, not with anger, but with shock. "Sarah, you can't keep doing this," Dr. Morrison said quietly, his voice heavy with concern. "The treatments you've been giving her, they're not approved. If the medical board finds out—" Vincent leaned forward, every sense on high alert. "I don't care about the board," Sarah's voice cracked with raw emotion. "I can't watch her die when there's a chance. The experimental protocol from Japan showed a 30% success rate. And you're risking your entire career, your medical license, everything you've worked for." Experimental treatments? Vincent's mind raced, reframing everything he'd witnessed over the past 3 days. "She's not just his mother anymore, Robert." Sarah's voice broke completely. She's the mother I lost when I was 12. Every time I look at her, I see my own mom dying in that hospital bed while I stood there helpless. I was just a child then, but I'm not helpless anymore." The older doctor's voice softened. "The treatments are expensive, Sarah. How are you even funding? I sold my apartment, my car. I've been using my savings, my retirement fund. I don't care about the money." Vincent's hands began to shake uncontrollably. The secretive phone calls, arranging experimental treatments, the mysterious deliveries, unauthorized medications from overseas, the money transfers, not theft, but Sarah bankrupting herself to save his mother. "And if Vincent finds out?" Dr. Morrison asked. "He can't know. If he knew I was using unapproved treatments, he'd make me stop. He'd want everything by the book, everything safe and legal. But safe and legal means watching her die in 3 months. I won't accept that." Through the monitor, Vincent watched Sarah bury her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs she'd been holding back for months. "I know what they say about me at the hospital," she whispered, "that I'm marrying him for money, for status. But the truth is, I fell in love with him because of how much he loved his mother. And I'm terrified that when she's gone, he'll realize he never needed me at all." Dr. Morrison placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "That young woman is not using you, Vincent," he said, as if speaking directly to the camera. She's someone who loves your mother as much as you do." Vincent's vision blurred as tears, something he hadn't allowed himself in 17 years, not since his father's death, suddenly streamed down his face. "The latest results from the lab came back today," Dr. Morrison continued, his tone shifting to cautious hope. "Oh, the tumor markers are down 40%. Sarah, whatever you're doing, it's working. Isabella might actually beat this." Sarah's head snapped up, hope flooding her exhausted face. "What? Are you certain?" "I need to run more tests, but yes. Your experimental protocol, it's saving her life." In the secret room, Vincent stood abruptly, his chair crashing backward. He'd been watching for betrayal and found sacrifice, watching for deception and found desperate, selfless love, watching for proof she was using him and found a woman who'd given everything, her career, her savings, her entire future, for a dying woman she'd known less than a year, a woman who saw his mother as the second chance to save the parent she'd lost as a child, a woman who was risking everything because she couldn't bear to watch someone else she loved slip away. Vincent's chest heaved as the full weight of his mistake crashed down on him. He'd tested the wrong person. She'd never been the one who needed proving. He had. And now, as he stood in that cold, dark room surrounded by monitors showing a woman crying alone after fighting to save his mother's life, Vincent Moretti, the man who trusted no one, who'd built walls around his heart for nearly 2 decades, felt those walls crumble to dust. He burst from the surveillance room, taking the stairs 3 at a time, his heart pounding a desperate rhythm. There was only one thought in his mind. I have to reach her. I have to tell her I know. I have to make this right. But to understand how Vincent Moretti, a man hardened by 17 years in the criminal underworld, came to this moment of reckoning, we must go back. Back to the night his mother first whispered her concerns, back to the moment he met Dr. Sarah Chen, back to the beginning of a love story that would be tested in ways neither of them could have imagined. The monitor's glow illuminated Vincent's face as dawn broke over the estate. He hadn't slept. Couldn't sleep. At 7 a.m. precisely, Sarah entered Isabella's room, her movements captured by 3 different angles. She was professional. Too professional. Vincent watched as she prepared the morning medications, her gloved hands arranging pills in their daily organizer with the precision of a pharmacist. Each capsule checked against a chart, each dosage measured. When she administered them to Isabella, helping the frail woman sit up, her touch was gentle but clinical. The practiced efficiency of a nurse, not a daughter-in-law caring for family. "Good morning, Isabella," Sarah's voice came through the speakers, warm enough on the surface. "Time for your medications?" Vincent leaned forward, studying her face on the screen. Where was the tenderness he'd seen at his bedside? The soft laughter, the gentle teasing? This Sarah moved through the room like a machine programmed for caregiving, technically flawless but emotionally hollow. At 8 a.m., she returned with breakfast, oatmeal, precise temperature, proper consistency for someone with swallowing difficulties. She fed Isabella spoonful by spoonful, efficient and thorough. But between bites, Sarah's eyes kept darting to her phone on the bedside table. "Who's calling you?" Vincent muttered at the screen. By 9 a.m., the bathing routine began. Vincent almost looked away. Some intimacies even surveillance shouldn't violate, but he forced himself to watch. This was the test. This was where true compassion revealed itself, in the vulnerable moments when dignity hung by a thread. Sarah was competent. She was kind, technically speaking. She protected Isabella's modesty, worked efficiently to minimize discomfort, spoke soothingly throughout. But something was missing, that indefinable quality that separated duty from devotion. Vincent's jaw tightened. When he'd been bedridden, Sarah had made him laugh during his most humiliating moments. She'd treated his vulnerability like it was precious, something to be honored rather than simply managed. With Isabella, she was performing. The thought twisted in his gut like a knife. At 10:30 a.m., Sarah's phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Now, and for the first time that morning, emotion cracked through her professional mask. Anxiety, sharp and unmistakable. She looked at Isabella, sleeping now after her bath, then stepped into the hallway. Vincent switched to the corridor camera, but she'd moved to the far end, near the window where the audio was poorest. He caught fragments only. "Can't right now," and "told you to wait," and something that might have been too dangerous. When she returned 5 minutes later, stress etched lines around her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. She checked on Isabella, then pulled out a small leather notebook from her bag. For 20 minutes, she wrote in it. Neat, careful notes that Vincent couldn't read from the camera angles. The housekeeper knocked before entering with fresh linens. Then Sarah's response was immediate and telling. She snapped the notebook shut and slipped it into her pocket, her smile for the housekeeper too bright, too quick. "Just documenting Isabella's morning routine," she said lightly. The housekeeper nodded and went about her work, but Vincent had seen Sarah's hand trembling as she pocketed that notebook. You don't hide innocent documentation. Throughout the afternoon medication round at 2 p.m., Vincent's unease crystallized into something sharper. Among the familiar prescriptions, Sarah produced 2 vials he didn't recognize. She administered them carefully, documenting in that same private notebook before tucking it away again. "What are you giving her?" Vincent whispered. His mind churned through possibilities, each darker than the last. And in his world, his real world of negotiated loyalties and calculated betrayals, trust was a currency that bought you either power or a bullet. He'd built his empire on reading people, on seeing through performances to the predator beneath. But Sarah had gotten past his defenses. She'd made him believe in softness again, in genuine care untainted by agenda. Had it all been an act? A long con played on a dying man's desperate heart? Evening brought a softer moment. Sarah read to Isabella from a worn copy of poetry, her voice melodic and soothing. Vincent watched the old woman's face. Isabella's eyes were open, lucid for once, and she wasn't watching the ceiling. She was watching Sarah. There was something in that gaze, knowledge, assessment, as if Isabella too was studying the woman caring for her. I'm seeing past the surface to whatever truth lay beneath. Sarah's phone buzzed. She faltered mid-sentence, her eyes flicking to the screen. When she continued reading, the poetry had lost its music. At 9 p.m., another phone call. Sarah stood in the hallway again, her back to the camera, shoulders hunched in what might have been defeat or determination. When she returned, she administered Isabella's evening medications and sat with her until the old woman slept. Then Sarah did something that froze Vincent's blood. She stayed, sat in the chair by Isabella's bed, hands gripping the armrests, staring at nothing. Her professional mask had shattered, leaving behind raw anguish Vincent could see even through the grainy camera feed. At midnight, she finally left the room. Vincent switched to the hallway camera and watched her collapse against the wall, sliding down until she sat on the floor, knees pulled to her chest. She was crying, quietly, desperately, her shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. Vincent's hand moved toward the intercom button. One press, and he could demand answers, could end this torture of uncertainty. But he stopped. Were those tears of genuine emotion, or the guilty conscience of someone in too deep? His finger hovered over the button as memories flooded back. Every betrayal in his criminal empire, every trusted lieutenant who'd sold him out, every partner who'd smiled while sharpening their knife. He'd survived by trusting no one, believing nothing at face value. But Sarah, God, he wanted to believe in Sarah. He pulled his hand back, jaw clenched hard enough to hurt. "Tomorrow," he whispered to the empty room, to the woman crying on his screen. "Tomorrow I'll know." The monitors hummed. Sarah's tears fell silently, and Vincent Moretti watched, trapped between love and suspicion, unable to look away. Vincent had been awake for 36 hours straight. The coffee had gone cold in his cup, untouched. On the monitors, Sarah paced Isabella's room with her phone pressed to her ear, whispering urgently. "The shipment arrives at 10, she said, glancing toward Isabella's sleeping form. "Yes, I understand the protocol, but the timeline, we're running out of time." Vincent's blood turned to ice. Shipment, protocol, timeline. These were his words, the vocabulary of deals made in darkness, of operations that couldn't see daylight. In 30 years of running Chicago's underworld, he'd heard 1,000 conspiracies begin with exactly this language. His hand moved to his phone, Marcus's number already queued. One call. That's all it would take. Marcus could have a team here in hours, could dig into Sarah's background so deep they'd find kindergarten report cards. But Vincent's finger hovered over the screen, unable to press. Not yet. Not until I'm sure. At 10 a.m., the doorbell camera activated. A delivery van, nondescript and unmarked. The driver handed Sarah a stack of boxes marked with medical supply logos. She signed quickly, checking over her shoulder before wheeling them inside. Vincent tracked her through the camera grid like a hunter following prey. She bypassed Isabella's room entirely, heading straight for the guest suite she'd claimed as her own. The door closed. He switched to the interior camera just as she began unpacking. Medical supplies, yes, but not the standard kind. Specialized equipment, medications in unmarked vials. She worked quickly, methodically, storing everything in a locked cabinet mounted in the closet, a cabinet Vincent didn't remember being there before. "What the hell are you hiding, Sarah?" By noon, she'd returned to Isabella's room. The old woman was awake, propped against pillows, her lucid moments becoming rarer. Sarah sat beside her, holding her hand with a tenderness that seemed genuine. Too genuine to be fake, unless she was just that good. "Are you doing this for him or for yourself?" Isabella's voice rasped through the speakers. Sarah's composure cracked. "I'm doing this because I can't bear to lose you." "Child?" Isabella squeezed her hand, those knowing eyes studying Sarah's face. "You're carrying too much alone." "I have to," Sarah's voice broke. "There's no one else who can." Vincent leaned closer to the screen, trying to decode the subtext, but Isabella had drifted off again, exhausted by even that brief conversation. At 2:30 p.m., Isabella cried out in pain. Not the usual discomfort. This was sharper, more urgent. Sarah moved with practiced efficiency, but instead of reaching for the official medication cart, she went to her room. She returned with one of the unmarked vials. Vincent's jaw clenched. He watched her administer the injection, watched Isabella's features relax within minutes, faster than any standard pain medication should work. Unauthorized medication. He typed the note into his phone, adding it to the growing list of irregularities. An hour later, Sarah sat at the desk in Isabella's room, laptop open. Vincent adjusted the camera angle and felt his stomach drop. Banking website, multiple accounts, and Sarah was transferring money, large sums, 6 figures moving between accounts with practiced efficiency. Some he recognized as his own offshore holdings. Others were unfamiliar. She was accessing his money, moving his funds. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife wound he'd survived. He'd given her access to everything, trusted her with passwords that could destroy his empire. And she was systematically dismantling his financial architecture. Vincent stood abruptly, the chair clattering behind him. His hand was on the door before he could think, ready to storm down the hallway and demand answers. Demand the truth he'd been too blind, too desperate, too in love to see. But he stopped. His reflection stared back from the darkened monitor screen, a ghost of the man he'd been. When had he become someone who acted on emotion instead of evidence? In his world, assumptions got you killed. You needed proof. You needed to see everything before you made your move. "One more day," he whispered to his reflection. "One more day." He returned to the monitors, fists clenched so tight his knuckles went white. His phone buzzed. "Marcus." "How's Chicago, boss?" The familiar gravel of his second-in-command's voice. "Thompson's asking about the Northside deal." Vincent forced his voice steady. "Tell Thompson I'll handle it when I return. Everything under control there?" "Quiet as a library. You need anything?" "Everything. I need to know if the woman I love is destroying me." "No. Keep things running smooth. I'll be back soon." He ended the call and stared at the phone. He'd just lied to Marcus, the one man in his organization he'd never deceived. The weight of his own deception pressed down like a physical thing. Evening brought the worst revelation yet. Sarah set up a video call on her tablet, propping it on the desk. The face that appeared was professional, clinical. Another doctor, judging by the white coat and the medical office visible behind him. "Show me her charts," the doctor said. Sarah angled the tablet, displaying Isabella's medical records. They discussed numbers, dosages, what they kept calling the protocol. Vincent strained to hear every word, his medical knowledge just sufficient enough to catch fragments. Experimental treatment, off-label use, unapproved therapies. "Phase 2 is critical," the doctor warned. "If anyone finds out what you're doing, Sarah, this could cost you everything. Your license, your career, possibly even criminal charges." Sarah's response was immediate, fierce. "She's worth everything." The call ended. Sarah sat in the darkness of Isabella's room, her face illuminated only by the tablet's fading glow. Vincent sat in his own darkness, pieces of the puzzle scattered before him. Unauthorized medications, secret deliveries, money transfers, coded conversations, an experimental protocol that could cost Sarah everything. 2 pictures formed from the same fragments. 1, an elaborate betrayal. Sarah stealing from him, slowly poisoning Isabella, preparing to disappear with his money while he rotted in this room, unable to stop her. 2. Something else. Something he couldn't quite see yet, obscured by his own paranoia and fear. And he didn't know which possibility terrified him more. The truth that she'd betrayed him, or the truth that his suspicion had betrayed her. "One more day," he whispered again, though he wasn't sure he believed it anymore. "I'll give it one more day before I decide what to do." On the monitor, Sarah laid her head on Isabella's bed and wept, and Vincent Moretti watched, a prisoner of his own making, unable to look away. The first crack of thunder shook the mansion's foundation at 5:47 p.m. Vincent watched through the monitors as the New York sky turned bruised dark, rain lashing against the windows in horizontal sheets. Lightning split the darkness, and for a moment, every screen in his surveillance room went white. The lights flickered. Once, twice, then darkness. Vincent's heart stopped, but only for the 3 seconds it took the backup generators to roar to life. The monitors blinked back on, bathing the room in their eerie glow. Through rain-distorted camera lenses, he could see the mansion's windows rattling in their frames, trees bending like supplicants before the wind. On the screen showing Isabella's room, Sarah moved to close the curtains against the storm. That's when Isabella began to choke. The sound came through the speakers, wet, desperate gasping. Sarah spun from the window as Isabella's body arched against the pillows, her hands clawing at her throat. The heart monitor Vincent hadn't even noticed before began its terrible alarm, numbers plummeting on the display Sarah had positioned beside the bed. Vincent lurched forward, his hands flat against the monitors. "No, no, no! No!" Sarah moved with the fluid precision of someone who'd trained for exactly this moment. No screaming, no panic. She tilted Isabella's head back, checked her airways with 2 fingers, her other hand already reaching for the oxygen mask. But she didn't reach for her phone, didn't call 911. "What are you doing?" Vincent's voice cracked. "Call someone! Call someone!" Instead, Sarah grabbed her cell phone and pressed a single contact. The call connected in seconds. "Dr. Morrison, I need you now." Her voice was steel, wrapped in urgency. "Isabella's in respiratory distress. Vitals are dropping. Get here, 20 minutes or less." She ended the call and returned to Isabella, adjusting oxygen flow, checking pulse points with practiced efficiency. The monitor's alarm screamed its warning, and Sarah silenced it with one hand while the other steadied Isabella's convulsing form. Vincent's world tilted on its axis. Dr. Morrison, Jonathan Morrison, the family physician who'd treated Vincent's childhood scraped knees, who'd delivered the diagnosis when his father's heart finally gave out, who'd been there for every Moretti medical crisis for 20 years. But why call him instead of 911? Why no ambulance, no emergency room? Unless she wanted Isabella to die here, quietly, where no hospital could intervene. Vincent's hand moved to the gun he kept in the desk drawer. His fingers wrapped around cold metal, and he stood, every muscle coiled for action. 3 steps to the door. 10 seconds to Isabella's room. He could stop this. He could save her. But on the monitor, Sarah was performing manual respirations. Her hands gentle but firm on Isabella's chest, counting under her breath. Come on, Isabella. Stay with me. Just stay with me." The desperation in her voice stopped Vincent cold. This wasn't someone waiting for death. This was someone fighting it with everything she had. Sarah checked the monitors, made minute adjustments to the oxygen flow, felt for Isabella's pulse again. Every movement showed training, expertise, and something else. A fierce, desperate determination that Vincent recognized from mirrors, from the faces of soldiers who refused to leave fallen brothers behind. Thunder crashed overhead. On the monitor, the front door camera activated. A figure burst through. Dr. Morrison, gray hair plastered to his skull, drenched despite the umbrella he'd abandoned on the steps. And his medical bag swung from one hand as he took the stairs 2 at a time. Vincent tracked him through the camera grid, watching the old doctor rush into Isabella's room. No pleasantries, no wasted words. He went straight to the bedside, and suddenly there were 2 doctors working in perfect synchronization. "Vitals?" Morrison asked, already pulling out equipment. "BP 90/60 and dropping. Pulse thready at 45. Respiratory rate 6, labored." "The treatment?" "Administered at 1400 hours. This shouldn't be happening yet. We might need to accelerate the protocol." "Jonathan, if we accelerate, if we don't, we lose her tonight." Vincent stood frozen in his surveillance room, gun hanging forgotten in his hand, watching Sarah and Dr. Morrison fight for his mother's life. Sarah's hands never stopped moving, adjusting, monitoring, administering. Her face was set in lines of absolute focus, but her eyes held the kind of fear you couldn't fake. This wasn't the behavior of a betrayer. This was love, raw and terrified. But then what the hell was she hiding? 45 minutes that felt like 45 hours. Vincent watched every second, memorizing every movement, every desperate measure. The storm raged outside, and inside, 2 doctors waged war against death itself. Finally, mercifully, the heart monitor's rhythm steadied. Isabella's breathing evened out, though it remained shallow. Sarah checked the vitals one more time, then collapsed against the wall, sliding down until she sat on the floor, her scrubs soaked with sweat despite the mansion's chill. Dr. Morrison performed one final check, his weathered hands gentle on Isabella's wrist. "Stable. For now." "Thank God." Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Morrison helped her to her feet, but his expression was grim. He glanced at Isabella, then jerked his head toward the hallway. Sarah nodded, and they stepped outside, pulling the door almost closed behind them. Vincent lunged for the controls, boosting the audio feed in the corridor. But the storm's static crackled through the speakers, fragmenting their conversation into pieces. "Can't keep," Morrison's voice, sharp with concern. No choice. Sarah's response, barely audible. Dangerous, illegal, worth the risk. The words cut in and out like a broken transmission. Vincent adjusted filters, tried different microphones, but the storm's electrical interference turned their conversation into a maddening puzzle. They returned to Isabella's bedside after a few minutes, their body language tense. Morrison checked the monitors one more time, while Sarah adjusted Isabella's blankets with trembling hands. They stood on opposite sides of the bed, and Vincent could see them bracing for a conversation neither wanted to have. The old doctor looked at Sarah with something like pity. Then his voice came through the speakers, clear despite the storm, heavy with the weight of finality. Sarah, you can't keep doing this. Vincent's blood ran cold. What can't she keep doing? On the monitor, Sarah's face crumpled. Morrison laid a hand on her shoulder, and she gripped his wrist like a drowning woman clutching driftwood, and Vincent Moretti stood in his surveillance room, gun in hand. As watching the woman he loved face something terrible, something he still couldn't see, couldn't understand, but was absolutely certain would destroy them both. Through the monitors, Vincent watched Dr. Morrison turn to face Sarah fully, his weathered features set in the expression of a man about to deliver a verdict. The treatments you've been giving her, Morrison's voice was quiet but firm. They're not approved. Sarah, if the medical board finds out, you'll lose everything. Vincent's world tilted sideways. Experimental treatments? Sarah's professional composure, that careful mask she'd worn for 2 days straight, shattered like glass. I don't care about the board. You should care. Your license, your career. I don't care, Jonathan. Her voice cracked, raw with months of suppressed emotion. I can't watch her die knowing there's a chance. There's a 30% success rate with the Japanese protocol. 30%. That's better than the 0% she has with standard treatment at stage 4. Vincent's grip on the desk turned his knuckles white. Stage 4. He'd known intellectually what the original diagnosis meant, but hearing it spoken aloud, so baldly, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. You're risking everything, Morrison said gently. Your medical license, your reputation, your entire career, and you're doing it without Vincent's knowledge, without his permission. Because he'd make me stop. Sarah's voice broke. Everything by the book, safe and legal. That's Vincent. That's who he is, who he has to be. But safe and legal means watching her die in 3 months. And I can't. She pressed her hands to her face. I won't accept that. Morrison's voice softened. How are you funding this? The medications alone must cost... I sold my apartment. Sarah's answer was barely audible. My car, my savings, my retirement fund. She laughed, a bitter sound. I don't care about the money. The surveillance room spun around Vincent. His hands began shaking uncontrollably, tremors that started in his fingers and radiated up his arms until his whole body quaked. Not theft, sacrifice. Every suspicion inverted in an instant, flipping like a card to reveal the truth beneath the lies he'd told himself. The secretive phone calls weren't conspiracies. They were Sarah coordinating treatments with specialists across the world. The hidden medications weren't poison. They were hope, smuggled in at tremendous personal cost. And the money transfers he'd watched weren't her stealing from him. They were her destroying herself to save his mother. And if Vincent finds out? Morrison asked. Sarah's laugh was hollow. He can't. He'd make me stop. He'd say it's too risky, too dangerous, not FDA approved. He'd want second opinions and peer reviews and clinical trials. Her voice dropped to a whisper. But we don't have time for any of that. She has months, Jonathan. Months. She collapsed into the chair beside Isabella's bed, and the dam finally broke. Months of held-back emotion poured out in silent, shaking sobs. The burden she'd been carrying alone, the weight of Isabella's life, the sacrifice of her own future, the terror of discovery, it all crashed down at once. She's not just his mother anymore, Sarah whispered through her tears. She's the mother I lost when I was 12. Vincent's breath caught. My mom died of cancer. I was helpless then, just a child watching her fade. But now, Sarah's hands clenched into fists. Now I have knowledge, skills, access, and I'm using every bit of it. Consequences be damned. She looked up at Morrison, her face raw and honest, in a way Vincent had never seen. I know what they say about me at the hospital, that I'm marrying him for money, for status, the ambitious nurse who landed a rich man. The irony made her laugh again, that broken sound. They don't know I'm bankrupting myself. They don't know I fell in love with Vincent because of how much he loves his mother. Vincent's vision blurred. When had he last cried? 17 years ago, standing over his father's casket. He'd built walls so high that nothing could breach them, not betrayal, not violence, not even the diagnosis that was slowly stealing his mother from him. But now those walls were crumbling. I'm terrified, Sarah whispered, so quietly Vincent had to strain to hear, that when she's gone, he'll realize he never needed me, that I was just the nurse who happened to be here, temporary, disposable. No. The word tore through Vincent's chest. No, no, no. Morrison placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of decades of wisdom. That young woman is not someone using you, Vincent. He looked directly at the camera mounted in the corner, as if he knew, as if he'd always known. She's someone who loves your mother as much as you do. The first tear broke free, sliding down Vincent's cheek. Then another. And another. 17 years of emotional lockdown shattering in the face of a truth so simple, so devastating. He couldn't understand how he'd missed it. She loved his mother. She loved him. And he'd repaid that love with surveillance and suspicion. Morrison pulled out his phone, scrolling through something before showing Sarah the screen. Latest results came back today from the lab. Sarah's head snapped up, hope and terror warring on her face. Tumor markers are down 40%. The world stopped. What? Sarah's voice was barely a breath. Jonathan, you're certain? I need more tests to be absolutely sure, but yes, the scans show significant reduction in tumor size. Sarah, whatever you're doing, Morrison's smile was gentle, genuine. It's working. Isabella might actually beat this. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, and fresh tears streaming down her face. But these were different. These were hope made liquid, joy too big for her body to contain. Your experimental protocol, Morrison continued, is saving her life. Vincent stood so abruptly, his chair crashed backward, the sound explosive in the small room. His hands shook as he gripped the edge of the desk, staring at the monitors through a haze of tears. 17 years of emotional walls, collapsing. Everything he thought he knew, inverted. Every suspicion, every fear, every cold calculation, all of it wrong. Catastrophically, shamefully wrong. He'd been watching for betrayal and found sacrifice, watching for deception and found desperate love, watching for an enemy and found the woman who'd given up everything, her career, her savings, her future, for a chance to save the two people she loved most. What have I done? Vincent whispered to the empty room, to the monitors showing Sarah's tears of joy, to the mother sleeping peacefully thanks to the woman he'd doubted. On the screen, Sarah held Isabella's hand, her shoulders shaking with the kind of crying that comes from too much emotion to process. Morrison stood beside her, one hand on her shoulder, bearing witness to her breaking and her rebuilding all at once. And Vincent Moretti, the man who'd built an empire on cold calculation and colder suspicion, wept for the first time in 17 years, not for what he'd lost, but for what he'd nearly destroyed. Vincent exploded from the surveillance room like a man possessed. His feet hammered down the hallway, taking the stairs 3 at a time, his hand gripping the banister to keep from stumbling as tears blurred his vision. And his heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat, in his temples, in every extremity. One thought drove him forward, singular and desperate. I have to reach her. He hit Isabella's door at full speed and threw it open. 3 faces turned toward him in synchronized shock. Isabella propped against her pillows, weak but awake, her eyes widening in confusion at her son's sudden appearance. Dr. Morrison, stepping back instinctively, his medical bag still in hand. And Sarah, her tear-stained face draining of all color, terror flooding her features as she registered Vincent standing in the doorway. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be in Chicago. "Vincent, I can explain." Her voice trembled, each word a prayer and a plea. She took a half-step back, her hands coming up in a gesture that was part defense, part supplication. "Please, just let me—" She thought he was there to destroy her. He could see it in every line of her body, the way she braced for impact, prepared for his anger, his sense of betrayal, the cold dismissal of a man who'd discovered deception. She was readying herself to lose everything. Vincent crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. The embrace was so sudden, so fierce, that Sarah gasped against his chest. He held her like a drowning man clutching driftwood, like she might disappear if he loosened his grip even slightly. Not anger, not accusation, just desperate, overwhelming need. "You beautiful, reckless, magnificent woman," he whispered into her hair, his voice breaking on every word. "You were never the one being tested. I was." He pulled back just enough to see her face, and his hands framing her tear-stained cheeks. "And I failed. God help me, I failed so completely." Sarah stared up at him, confusion warring with hope in her red-rimmed eyes. "What are you? Vincent, I don't understand." "Marry me tomorrow." The words fell like a bomb in the quiet room. "Not in 3 months. Tomorrow." His voice carried an urgency that bordered on desperation. "Because I can't spend one more day knowing you're carrying this alone. I won't." Her eyes went wide, shock replacing confusion. You know? About the treatments?" Vincent nodded, his thumbs wiping away fresh tears from her cheeks. "I know everything. But how—" Her voice cracked. "You were in Chicago. How could you possibly—" Shame flooded his features. "I was watching, testing you. Like a fool." The admission tasted like ash. "I never left. I set up surveillance, faked the trip, watched you through cameras like some paranoid—" He couldn't finish. The self-loathing was too thick in his throat. Sarah's face showed every emotion at once: betrayal, understanding, hurt, relief, all of them cycling too fast to settle on just one. "I watched you sacrifice everything," Vincent continued, his voice raw. "Your apartment, your savings, your career, your future. All for my mother, for me." He gripped her shoulders gently. "I know I don't deserve you. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I'm selfish enough to keep you anyway if you'll still have me." He turned to Dr. Morrison, and the Mafia boss emerged. The man who'd built an empire on iron will and absolute authority. "Whatever she needs, whatever it costs, make it happen." Morrison opened his mouth, a professional concern etched on his features. "Vincent, the risks involved, legal, illegal, I don't care." Vincent's voice carried the weight of decades of command. "I want the full force of my resources behind this. Money, connections, access to any specialist anywhere in the world. You need experimental treatments? You'll have them. You need equipment that doesn't exist yet? I'll fund its creation." He looked between Morrison and Sarah. "Save my mother. Save them both." Because Sarah needed saving too, he realized. From the burden she'd been carrying alone, from the fear of discovery, from the terror of losing everything. My son? Isabella's voice, weak but clear, drew every eye to the bed. Tears streamed down the old woman's face, but her smile was radiant. She reached out with trembling hands, and then Vincent and Sarah moved to either side of the bed, each taking one of Isabella's hands. She squeezed with what little strength she had, her eyes moving between them. "She knew," Sarah whispered, understanding flooding her features. "You always knew, didn't you?" Isabella's smile widened slightly, and she managed the smallest nod. Dr. Morrison cleared his throat. "Vincent, we need to discuss the medical board, the legal ramifications. I'll handle the medical board." Vincent's tone left no room for argument. "I'll handle anyone who tries to stop this. Sarah's license is safe. I'll make sure of it." Morrison studied him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. The doctor was witnessing a transformation, watching the careful, controlled man he'd known for 20 years unleash the full force of what he was capable of when the people he loved were threatened. Sarah's legs gave out. Vincent caught her, lowering them both into the chair beside Isabella's bed, holding Sarah as she finally allowed herself to fall apart. Months of fear and secrecy and crushing burden released in wrenching sobs against his chest. "I was so afraid," she gasped between tears. "So alone. I thought if you found out, I thought I'd lose you both." "Never alone again," Vincent murmured into her hair, his own tears falling freely. "Never. We carry this together now." He kissed her forehead, her tear-stained cheeks, her trembling lips. "My strength is yours. Everything I have, everything I am, it's all yours." The room's energy shifted, transforming from crisis and secrets into something else entirely. Not just unity, but family. Real family, forged not in blood alone, but in sacrifice and choice and desperate love. Vincent pulled out his phone, still holding Sarah with one arm. He dialed Marcus. "Boss?" Marcus answered on the first ring. "I need you here, now! Drop everything!" Vincent's voice was steady now, purposeful. "We have work to do. On my way." The test was over. The real work was beginning. Vincent looked down at Sarah, still trembling in his arms, then across at his mother, watching them with peaceful contentment, then up at Dr. Morrison, who was shaking his head in wonder. "Tomorrow we start fighting this together," Vincent said, his voice carrying the absolute certainty of a man who'd finally found his purpose. "Tonight, but we start healing." Sarah lifted her head, searching his face through her tears. "Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," he confirmed. "You become my wife, and the day after that, and every day after. We save my mother's life." He cupped her face in his hands. "Together." For the first time in months, Sarah smiled. A real smile, full of hope and relief and overwhelming love. And Vincent Moretti, who'd spent 2 days watching for betrayal, finally understood what it meant to truly see. Vincent's home office transformed within hours into something resembling a military command center. Medical charts plastered one wall, their colorful graphs and diagnostic images creating a mosaic of Isabella's battle. On his mahogany desk, the same desk where he'd orchestrated corporate takeovers and territorial negotiations, now spread pharmaceutical contact lists, and treatment protocols, and shipping manifests. Marcus arrived at 11 p.m., his face showing the concern of a man summoned urgently in the middle of the night. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. Vincent, sleeves rolled up, tie discarded, poring over medical research. Sarah, exhausted but focused, organizing documents. Dr. Morrison on the phone, speaking rapid Japanese to someone on the other side of the world. "Boss?" Marcus's confusion was evident. Vincent looked up. "Close the door. You need to hear everything." 20 minutes later, Marcus sat in stunned silence as Sarah concluded her presentation. She'd laid it all out. The experimental immunotherapy protocol developed in Osaka, the targeted radiation treatments, the success rates that conventional medicine dismissed as statistically insignificant, but that she saw as Isabella's lifeline. 30% success rate, Sarah said, her finger tracing the data on her tablet. The protocol combines immunotherapy with precisely targeted radiation to attack stage 4 pancreatic cancer cells while stimulating the body's own immune response. But it requires medications that aren't FDA approved. The trials are still ongoing in Japan, won't be available here for another 2 to 3 years. And Isabella doesn't have 2 years, Vincent added quietly. Marcus studied the data, his tactical mind processing. Why couldn't you go through official channels? Compassionate use exemptions take months to process, Sarah explained. Clinical trial enrollment has strict criteria Isabella doesn't meet. She's too old, too advanced. By the time we navigated the bureaucracy, she'd be gone. Her voice hardened. So I found another way. Cost? Marcus asked. $50,000 per month, minimum 6 months. Sarah's voice was matter-of-fact. Plus equipment, monitoring Dr. Morrison's oversight fees, total estimated, I don't care. Vincent's interruption was absolute. 300,000, 3 million, it doesn't matter, whatever it costs. He was already on his phone, scrolling through contacts most people didn't know existed. I have pharmaceutical connections in Tokyo and Osaka. Shipping routes through Singapore that customs doesn't scrutinize too closely. He glanced at Marcus. We've moved more controversial cargo. This should be simple. Marcus's initial skepticism had evaporated as Sarah presented her research. Now he leaned forward. I in full operations mode. Boss, I'll coordinate logistics, secure shipping, customs facilitation, delivery schedules. You get whatever you need. There's the legal exposure, Dr. Morrison interjected, ending his phone call. Sarah's medical license is at risk. If the hospital board discovers, they won't. Vincent was already dialing his attorney. Jonathan, I need you now. Yes, I know it's midnight. I'm about to describe a situation that requires immediate legal protection. While Vincent outlined liability shields and documentation strategies, Sarah watched with an expression caught between gratitude and overwhelm. When he ended the call, she spoke quietly. There's something else you should know. The hospital, there's been gossip about me, about us. Her cheeks colored slightly. They think I'm using you, that I'm after money. High status. Vincent's expression darkened dangerously. Names. Give me names. Vincent, no. Sarah's hand on his arm stopped him. Let it go. Their opinions don't matter. Fighting them wastes energy we need for Isabella. He studied her face, then nodded slowly. But Marcus caught the look in his boss's eyes, a mental list being compiled for future reference. Vincent Moretti had a long memory. The wedding, Dr. Morrison said, checking his notes. Isabella mentioned wanting to see it? How soon can you arrange? 1 week, Vincent said decisively. Judge Carrington owes me a favor. Private ceremony here at the estate. Sarah's eyes widened. Vincent, that's so fast. The treatment protocol begins immediately, he continued, overriding her objection. Dr. Morrison will monitor Isabella's response. We'll establish checkpoints at 2 weeks. 1 month? 3 months? Adjust as needed based on results. The next hour blurred into organized chaos. The mansion staff was briefed, discreetly, professionally, about the situation. Medical equipment orders were placed for overnight delivery. Dr. Morrison sketched out a round-the-clock care schedule. Everyone rallied, united in purpose. Vincent pulled Sarah aside while Marcus coordinated with the pharmacy contacts in Japan. Your apartment, your car, the savings you liquidated, I'm reimbursing everything. Vincent, I can't. You can and you will. His tone left no room for argument. I've already arranged for the apartment purchase to be reversed and your car replaced. Your retirement fund will be restored by morning. That's too much. We're partners now, he said firmly, taking both her hands. What's mine is yours. What's yours is mine. That's what tomorrow's vows will mean. Start practicing now. Sarah's resistance crumbled. She nodded, tears spilling over. Together, she whispered. Together, he confirmed. At 9 p.m. that evening, they administered the first official treatment. Isabella lay propped against fresh pillows, Vincent holding her right hand, while Sarah prepared the medications with professional precision. Dr. Morrison monitored the vitals display, watching for any adverse reactions. "Are you ready, Isabella?" Sarah asked gently. The old woman's voice was weak but steady. "I've been ready. Now I'm actually hopeful." The treatment took 40 minutes. Vincent watched every second, memorizing the specific medications, the injection protocols, the careful way Sarah checked and double-checked dosages. This was the fight now, and not against rival families or corporate competitors, but against cancer cells and time itself. Isabella handled it better than expected. Minimal nausea, no immediate adverse reactions. Dr. Morrison noted everything, his experienced eyes showing cautious optimism. "Her baseline is stronger than I anticipated," he murmured to Sarah. "The previous treatments you administered may have already begun preparing her system." When Isabella finally slept, exhausted but peaceful, Vincent and Sarah remained at her bedside. Their hands found each other in the dim light, fingers intertwining with the easy comfort of people who'd already weathered storms together. "Whatever happens," Vincent said quietly, "we face it together." Sarah squeezed his hand, resting her head against his shoulder. Together. Outside the window, New York glittered in the darkness. Inside, 3 people bound by choice and sacrifice began a fight that would require everything they had. But for the first time in months, they weren't fighting alone. The mansion's garden had been transformed with understated elegance. White roses climbed the arbor, their petals catching the soft afternoon light. Chairs arranged in intimate rows held only the closest circle. Marcus, Dr. Morrison, a handful of trusted staff, and 2 of Sarah's friends from medical school who'd driven up from Philadelphia. In the front row, Isabella sat in her wheelchair, wrapped in a cashmere shawl despite the June warmth. But her smile blazed with a radiance that had nothing to do with the sun. Sarah stood before the full-length mirror in the guest room, adjusting the simple white dress she'd chosen. And no elaborate beading, no cathedral train, just clean lines and elegant simplicity. Her dark hair fell in natural waves around her shoulders, minimal makeup highlighting rather than transforming her features. She touched the small locket at her throat, her mother's, the only piece of jewelry she wore besides the engagement ring Vincent had presented 3 days ago. "I wish you could see this, Mom," she whispered to the woman who'd been gone 14 years. "I wish you could meet him." A knock at the door. One of her friends peeked in. "It's time." Vincent waited beneath the rose arbor, and Marcus stood beside him in an immaculate suit, serving as best man. But it was Vincent who commanded attention, not because of his tailored tuxedo or the power he typically projected, but because of his utter vulnerability. When Sarah appeared at the garden entrance, Vincent's carefully constructed composure shattered. Tears filled his eyes. This man who'd survived gang wars and corporate battles, who'd built an empire on stone-cold calculation, and he didn't bother to hide them. Marcus clasped his shoulder, visibly moved himself. "Steady, boss," he murmured. "Can't," Vincent whispered back, his voice breaking. "Look at her." Sarah walked toward him without fanfare, without a traditional procession. Just her, moving through the garden with quiet grace, her eyes locked on his. When she reached him, he took her hands, and the tremor in his grip matched her own. Dr. Morrison stood before them in ministerial robes. He'd gotten ordained specifically for this ceremony, declaring that after everything they'd been through, no stranger would marry these 2. "We gather today, Morrison began, his voice warm with affection. "Not for a traditional wedding, but for the union of two souls who've already proven their commitment in fire." Vincent and Sarah had written their own vows. No traditional promises would suffice for what they'd endured. Vincent spoke first, his voice steady despite the tears tracking down his face. "Sarah, I tested you when I should have trusted you. I watched you in shadows when I should have stood beside you in the light. But you showed me that love isn't about perfection. It's about sacrifice made for the right reasons, secrets kept to protect what matters most." He squeezed her hands. "I promise to always see you, truly see you, to never doubt the heart that beats beside mine, to trust first and question never, because you've earned that trust in ways I didn't have the wisdom to recognize until almost too late." Sarah's tears fell freely now. She took a shaking breath. "Vincent, you gave me back the family I lost. In fighting to save your mother, I found my own healing, the chance to use my knowledge and skills to protect someone I love instead of watching helplessly as I did when I was 12. Her voice strengthened. "I promise to carry our burdens together, never alone again, to love you not for what you can give me, because I know now you'd give me everything, but for who you are, darkness and light both, the protector and the warrior, the son and the man, all of you, without reservation." From her wheelchair, Isabella raised a trembling hand. Dr. Morrison paused, and everyone turned toward her. "May I?" she asked, her voice weak but clear. Vincent moved to her side immediately, helping her stand. She gripped his arm for support as she addressed the small gathering. "I told my son to watch when he thought no one was looking," Isabella said, and Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "I knew. A mother always knows." A soft smile played at her lips. "He watched and learned the greatest lesson, that the best people shine brightest in the shadows when they think no one will see their sacrifice." Tears streamed down her face. "Sarah, you are my daughter now, not by blood, but by choice, and that makes you even more precious." Vincent helped his mother sit, then returned to Sarah's side, both of them crying openly now. "The rings," Dr. Morrison prompted gently. Marcus produced them, simple gold bands elegant in their plainness. They exchanged rings with shaking hands. "By the power vested in me," Morrison said, his own voice thick with emotion, "I pronounce you husband and wife. Vincent, you may kiss your bride." The kiss was tender, meaningful, full of promise and pain and hope all mixed together. When they pulled apart, the small gathering erupted in applause. Vincent pressed his forehead to Sarah's. "Mrs. Moretti," he whispered. She laughed through her tears. "Mr. Moretti." The reception flowed seamlessly into the mansion's dining room, where an intimate dinner had been prepared. Isabella occupied the seat of honor at the head of the table, her energy flagging but her spirit undaunted. Marcus stood for his toast, champagne glass raised. "I've known Vincent for 20 years, watched him build an empire, survive betrayals, navigate impossible situations, but I never saw him cry." He paused, then looking at Sarah. "Until last week. That's how I knew you were the one. To the woman who broke through walls I thought unbreakable." Dr. Morrison followed. "To the bravest doctor I've ever known, who risked everything for love. And to the man wise enough to recognize that courage. May your love continue to heal, yourselves, each other, and the family you've chosen." Then Isabella stood, wavering slightly until both Vincent and Sarah rushed to support her. She waved them off gently, gripping the table for balance. "To my daughter. Because that's what you are now, Sarah. Thank you for fighting for me when I couldn't fight for myself." Her voice grew stronger. "And to my son, who finally learned to see with his heart instead of just his eyes. And your father would be so proud of the man you've become." The dinner continued with stories and laughter, genuine joy filling spaces that had held too much fear and secrecy. Sarah and Vincent fed each other cake with playful tenderness, and for those few hours, the weight of illness and experimental treatments lifted. When the string quartet began playing in the garden, Vincent led Sarah into their first dance. He held her close, swaying gently to the music under the stars. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. "I love you," she answered against his chest. "I love you," he repeated, like a man making up for lost time. Then Vincent danced with his mother, supporting most of her weight as they moved slowly to the music. She was weak, exhausted, but determined. "Your father would be proud," she whispered. "You chose well." "My son." "I chose the woman who saved both our lives," Vincent replied. As the evening wound down and guests departed, Vincent and Sarah returned to Isabella's room with her. The three of them sat in comfortable silence, Isabella in her bed, Sarah and Vincent in chairs on either side, all holding hands. Isabella fell asleep first, her breathing even and peaceful. Vincent and Sarah watched her for a long moment before quietly retreating to their own room, their room now, officially. They stood on the balcony, Sarah's back against Vincent's chest, his arms wrapped around her waist. The garden spread below them, the New York skyline glittering in the distance. "6 months of treatment ahead," Sarah said quietly, "monitoring, protocols, hoping the tumor markers keep dropping." "We'll face it together," Vincent said firmly. "As a team. No more secrets, no more carrying burdens alone." She turned in his arms to face him. "Whatever comes, we're ready." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. More than ready. They stood there as the stars emerged one by one, the city humming with life below them, the woman they both loved sleeping peacefully inside. Sarah rested her head on Vincent's shoulder, his arms tightening around her. "This is where our real story begins," she whispered, and Vincent Moretti, who'd spent so long watching from the shadows, finally stepped fully into the light, with his wife beside him and his mother fighting for her life, supported by love that had proven itself in fire. Together, they faced the future. The sterile scent of the hospital usually signaled a countdown to an end, but today, the air in the examination room felt charged with a different kind of electricity. Isabella sat on the edge of the table, her hands enveloped by Vincent's calloused grip on one side and Sarah's steady, trembling fingers on the other. Dr. Morrison entered, a thick manila folder tucked under his arm. For a moment, his expression was a closed book, the kind of professional neutrality that makes a heartbeat thunder in the ears. He sat, took a breath that seemed to last an eternity, and opened the file. "The tumor markers," Morrison began, his voice cracking slightly, "are undetectable." Silence fell, heavy and absolute. "The masses have shrunk by 93%, Isabella. You're in remission. It's a miracle." Isabella didn't scream. She simply let out a jagged sob that turned into a radiant, disbelieving smile. Beside her is Vincent's iron composure, the legendary facade of the Moretti Dawn, finally shattered. He bowed his head against his mother's shoulder, his frame shaking with silent relief. Sarah, ever the clinician, felt the surge of professional vindication wash over her, followed by a wave of pure human joy. The experimental protocol, the risks, the legal shadows they had walked through, it had worked. The months that followed saw the Moretti mansion shed its skin. The hospital beds and oxygen tanks were rolled out, replaced by vibrant linens and fresh flowers. Isabella wasn't just surviving. She was reclaiming her life. "You look different," Marcus remarked one afternoon, watching Vincent review legitimate business filings in the study. The consigliere didn't need to specify. The cold, And predatory stillness that once defined Vincent had been replaced by a grounded human presence. He was still a man to be feared, but he was no longer a man ruled by the darkness of his own suspicion. Sarah's life had transformed as well. The medical board investigation, backed into a corner by Vincent's elite legal team, and the undeniable evidence of Isabella's recovery had been dropped. Her reputation wasn't just restored, it was elevated. She was now a pioneer, collaborating with the Japanese researchers she had once contacted in desperation to bring her protocol into the light of legality. During a quiet dinner, Isabella dropped her own bombshell. "I've signed a lease on an apartment in the city," she announced, sipping her wine with a glow that had nothing to do with the candlelight. "This is your home." "A mother!" Vincent protested immediately. Isabella reached across the table, taking both their hands. "You saved my life so I could live it, Vincent, not so I could play the ghost in your attic. You and Sarah are newlyweds. You need space to build a life that isn't centered around a sickbed. I want to travel. I want to volunteer. I might," she added with a mischievous glint, "even go on a date." They laughed, the sound echoing through a house that had forgotten how to be a home. A year to the day since Vincent had first initiated his test, he led Sarah to the basement. The heavy steel door of the surveillance room groaned as it opened. Inside, the monitors were layered in a fine coat of dust. Sarah walked to the center of the room, her hand grazing the cold screens that had once broadcast her every private moment. "This is where you learn to trust," she whispered. "This is where I almost lost my soul," Vincent countered. There was no need for these ghosts anymore. Together, they began pulling the cables from the walls, the snap of disconnecting wires signaling the end of an era. They covered the consoles with heavy white sheets and walked out. Vincent turned the key in the lock and handed it to Sarah. "No more watching," he promised. "Only trusting." Their final stop was a quiet cemetery. Sarah stood before her mother's headstone, Vincent a solid weight at her side. "Mom, I found my family," Sarah whispered, placing a bouquet of lilies on the grass. "And I saved a life like I couldn't save yours." Vincent stepped forward, bowing his head in a rare show of humility to the woman who had raised the doctor who saved him. He then led Sarah back to the car, but instead of heading home, he drove to a sleek, glass-fronted building on the edge of the medical district. The silver lettering on the facade caught the afternoon sun. The Chen Moretti Cancer Research Center. "Your life's work deserves a foundation, Sarah," Vincent said, watching her eyes fill with tears. "A place where the miracles are legal from day one." That night, the mansion was filled with the scent of a home-cooked meal and the sound of Isabella's laughter. As the city of New York sprawled out beyond their windows, Vincent and Sarah sat on the terrace, looking toward the future. "Do you regret it?" Sarah asked softly. "Testing me?" Vincent looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "I regret the doubt, but that doubt forced me to see the depth of your truth, and it was a necessary pain to reach this peace." He pulled her closer. "I lived my whole life believing love was a vulnerability to be exploited. You taught me that love is the only risk worth taking." In the end, Vincent had learned what no camera could ever capture. The truest measure of love isn't found in the security of watching someone when they think they are alone. It is found in the courage to be watched, to be known, and to be trusted. Sarah had passed a test she never knew she was taking, simply by being herself, and in doing so, she had done the impossible. She had turned a predator into a partner and a house of secrets into a home.